Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks. Today, we're so lucky to be joined by the fantastic Caitlin Carmichael to talk all about her latest film, Midnight in the Switchgrass. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the character details and the spaces that you went beyond what the script gives you, because it gives you little hints and little elements of your character's backstory and home life, but that's not where we meet her within the film. We meet her when she has actually left home and is on this very different trajectory, obviously. And so I was very interested in a lot of the work that you did to really flesh out and enrich her backstory as a character and a lot of the details that you thought were important to decide upon for her for your performance.
Thank you so much, Mara, first of all, for having me. And what an insightful question to kick off this interview with. I think a huge responsibility that I put on myself when playing Tracy was bringing that authenticity of her story to life. And I've played characters who've been kidnapped before, but our film is based on the real events of the Highway Serial Killings Initiative started by the FBI in 2009. So I knew that Tracy was really serving as a representative character for the girls in this period of time who were abducted by long haul truck drivers and living these so-called high risk lifestyles. So having her as a symbolic character, first of all, was something that I really wanted to make sure framed my performance in bringing this authenticity to life. And as far as Tracy's backstory, we really don't know much about her other than her sister Heather and my co-star Sistine Stallone. Her performance is really all that I had to go off of when seeing what Tracy's life was like and really using the elements of our production design in that motel room and a couple of snippets of background audio from Tracy's opening scene was really all that I had to work with in that way. Tracy, I know, is supposed to serve as a symbol not only for these women in so-called high-risk lifestyles, but also she's a more innocent form of these women and presenting more of a childlike gaze than some of the more adult women we see in the film. But I really had to focus on the immediate circumstances that Tracy was facing in the abduction narrative and bringing that authenticity to life.
Yeah. And one of the very first moments where we meet your character in the film is, like you said, when she's walking away from a motel room with her sister and some other people in her. We hear a little bit of that voiceover. And then we follow your character as she goes into the truck yard, as there's some drivers kind of catcalling or offering to take her somewhere. But there's no dialogue from your character at any point during that scene. And so I was really interested in what that journey and what that process looked like in filming those scenes, because they really start setting up such an idea of the space that your character is in throughout the film.
They do. And some of the hardest work in acting, I think, is when you're not talking and having to be present and reactive, I guess. When we filmed that original scene where Tracy leaves the motel room, they actually had set up a kind of makeshift party happening inside. So that was really there going on during the day of filming. And I remember there was a group of strangers who I had never met, and I didn't really get the time to get to know everyone's names and get to meet everyone who were our background in that scene. And that kind of created a sense of unfamiliarity to me, having being surrounded by strangers who were leaving, which is kind of what Tracy is experiencing in that moment. So I was able to find that common ground with her. But we actually weren't able to film the match cut second part of the scene until September. So we originally started in March of 2020, and we weren't able to film the rest of the scene until September, when we were finally able to finish the movie due to our needs based on the locations. So it was extremely crucial that we matched the tone of that initial shot. We had that opening scene finished and completed with music, and there was so much pressure trying to make sure that we matched that perfectly in Tracy's continued walk. I remember Randall really wanted to capture a sense of like a state of being disassociative, and Tracy's completely disassociating to anything in her environment due to the drugs and aftermath of the party that she's been to. So it was very easy for me just to stay in my own head in a way. I remember it was so important to Randall to have the opening scene play with that specific song that comes back to haunt us later in the movie. And I was singing that song in my head over and over as though I was scoring the movie in my head. That kind of helped me disassociate from my surroundings a little bit.
Were there any other spaces in the film where you used music as a tool for just getting into the mindset and getting into the tone of any of the scenes, or was it really just that specific one because of the song?
I tried not to pick any other music to associate in my head because I wasn't sure if it would match the ambiance of what Randall wanted for the movie. It might have been my music taste or how I would have gotten into the emotional headspace for my character, but it was really just that one specific song. It's called Brothers in Arms, I believe. It's so haunting. It was the perfect melody for our movie, and it comes back and it's just bone chilling. There's that sense of familiarity playing over again. I love it.
So I also wanted to talk about working with Lucas Haas, who plays Peter in the film, who is the character who it turns out is abducting these young women, and a lot of the work that the two of you did together in the scenes when Tracy has been kidnapped and is being held in that room, because there's a lot of moments where there's a lot of physical closeness between the two of them, where he grabs her face and he's talking really closely, and the camera does a lot of extreme close up, and so was there a lot of choreography and blocking that got very specific when it went into filming a lot of those scenes together?
Yes, and I think one of the things about shutting down multiple times and having such an extended filming process that I actually ended up being so thankful for was the extended amount of time to get to know my castmates, especially Lucas. And when we were quarantined to our resort in Puerto Rico for 2.5 weeks, so Lucas and I had lots of time to work on our lines and have extended rehearsals. But aside from that, just get to know each other off camera, going to dinners and riding bikes around our hotel, and having that ability to develop off-screen chemistry allowed both of us to be so comfortable working in that space and really project that intensity that was needed for the scene. I know a lot of actors are fans of working with complete strangers and preserving that unfamiliarity to only get to know someone in character. But for me, and filming a scene like this, and I think I can speak for Lucas too, it was actually great for us to get to know each other and develop an open sense of communication, and to know that I was okay with him really going for it in this scene to present as much intensity and brutality and the vileness of his character that needed to be seen on screen. I remember telling him, I was like, really go for it. Be as aggressive as you can, as authentic as you can, because I think that's what his performance needed. And I didn't want him to be afraid of hurting me or doing too much. I was like, I promise I'll tell you if it's going to be too much. But I was really happy to have a co-star who understood that, because it felt for me as though my performance was more genuine and truthful, and there wasn't anything superficial about those scenes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different spaces in which your character goes into as her survival instinct kicks in. There's moments where she wants to fight back a little bit more. There's moments where she's like, if I just stay quiet and do everything that he says, then it'll be okay. So were those details that were forthcoming from the script and really understanding the different emotional headspaces that she was in? Or was there also a lot of working with Randall and really figuring out, okay, this is when she's going to try and fight back a little bit. This is when she's just going to succumb and let herself kind of just go into the corner a little bit more?
There was a great outline of those moments and the emotional waves that Tracy experienced, but Randall really had some great direction when Megan's character Lombardo is brought into this environment. It is really a change for Tracy emotionally, and I think as Lombardo's character's strength, we see her submit to a state of vulnerability in able to process such a triggering situation for her, as we've learned about her past circumstances earlier in the film. And Tracy, starting off in such a state of vulnerability, is able to embrace her inner strength. So it's a great kind of a role reversal with Tracy and Lombardo's character that helps Tracy find that strength in order to escape. And that was a really nice note that I got from Randall.
And when you first stepped onto set and saw that location of where your character is being held, and even just the physical experience of spending time there on set, how did that really feed into a lot of your understanding of everything that she was going through in this experience?
I think first of all, we had an amazing production design team, and that is such a crucial element of storytelling and having the world feel as accurate as possible. And especially as a reader, it was so refreshing to see something so similar to what I imagined when I was reading the script. Our first rehearsal happened in the box, as we like to call it, and it was basically an empty tool shed. But every time we would return, there was some new horrifying element that was added. And I wish we would have had time just to do a slow pan around the entire room to see all of the detail that they added. But there were some very haunting things that I discovered when I was shifting through the room for my escape, which was actually a note from Randall. He didn't want to tell me where the sewage pipe was and wanted me to find it for myself during filming and have that authentic experience on camera happen, filming it once and see it play out in real time. And as I was shifting through the room looking for this way of escape, I was finding stuffed animals and children's blankets as though they could have come from Peter's daughter's room. And that was a whole other level that added to the mindset of my character of just being disgusted by this man and his psyche. I think there were some moments that I really just came to that realization on camera for the first time, which was great.
And you were mentioning there one of the rehearsals that you had before shooting one of the scenes. Did you prefer to have more time to rehearse and to play around with a lot of those scenes, whether it was, the moments where we see you by yourself or with Lucas, or did you find that you almost wanted to save it and have a lot of those moments of discovery on camera a little bit more because of the places that you were having to go with your performance?
The duality of the question that you asked is very interesting because I'm kind of a fan of both components of the question. I am a huge advocate for lots of rehearsal because I like being able to get comfortable with the words I'm saying and comfortable with the movements that I'm going to be doing. But we mostly rehearsed the physicality of the scenes. So everything that was emotional really came on the day. And we were filming right as COVID protocols were starting up in the entertainment industry. So we were all rehearsing with masks on. And Randall was like, Caitlin, it's okay. You don't have to cry. I don't know if you're crying, but in case you are, I can't see your face and what you're doing. So it was very hard and it created an emotional distance in between all of us in a way that we had to learn to work around at first. But we were able to dive into the physical blocking of the scenes and get that down pat so that when we did go to film it, we were able to focus on the emotional deliverance of the lines and really fine tuning the plot devices, I guess, that we were using to convey this story in the scenes. Having an extended time to get the physicality down pat and rehearsing stunts and blocking and hand placement and having that with the camera allowed us just to really focus on the emotional performance on the day, which I loved.
Yeah, and you were bringing up the scene before where you have Megan Fox's character who's also been brought into the same space, but your characters can't see each other. They're only able to communicate through a wall in essence. Were they able to set up the location so that it was right next to her? Or how did the two of you really want to configure and work out that scene together? Because it's quite an interesting dynamic for the two of them to have where there's such an immediate connection, but there's also no history between these two characters.
Absolutely. And having that physical divide between them is such an interesting way to shoot the scene, I think. Actually, when we were filming this scene, Megan was doing her coverage and they configured me in a makeshift wooden wall behind a makeshift wooden wall next to camera, and I was sitting there balled up saying my lines opposite her, but they needed to get her sound clear without me speaking actually from the wall behind her. So we were really able to work around the camera and what our cinematographer needed, but I really wanted to position myself behind a wall and not be reading face to face with her to really feel that sense of physical disconnection. There's something really interesting about just being able to talk to the sound of someone's voice that we wanted to preserve in that scene.
That's really wonderful. And you were mentioning before Randall not wanting to give you the location for the escape and all of the details that you found, but also you capture such grit and there's such a sense of desperation because she knows that if she doesn't make it out in this moment, that that's probably it for her, and she's seen what he's capable of at this point. And so how did you find the balance of this character who's been trapped in a space for a prolonged period of time, is completely physically drained, but then finding those last little grasps that she's able to reach out to for herself to try and escape?
That was an amazing analysis of the scene. First of all, our writer Alan Horsnail is so talented in the in-depth description of Tracy's emotional journey during her escape that he had written for me on the page, and I just really wanted to do it justice what he wrote. But starting the scene in a state of utmost weakness was so interesting to me to be able to find that inner strength. And I was doing the escape myself. It was a real sewage pipe with real zip ties around my hands. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I wasn't claustrophobic going into filming. That was something that Randall had asked me in the audition room. And I didn't understand why until we were filming this scene. But I remember thinking to myself, we were filming and the camera was tracking me going out of the sewage pipe. And I was thinking I had no real means of encompassing how difficult it was actually going to be going for it on the day. Then I started thinking to myself, if I was really Tracy and if I was really kidnapped, I would not be able to escape my kidnapper, which was a horrifying thought. And then I was thinking, oh my gosh, myself as Caitlin, I'm not going to be able to deliver for this scene because I can't get out of this sewage pipe. So my own struggle and desperation and perseverance ended up mirroring what Tracy was going through. And I was really able to merge those emotional journeys together in a way.
And there's also a moment in the conversation with Megan where she mentions that her stomach really hurts because he's been putting a needle and injecting her with something to affect her physical ability throughout the entire time as well. Were there details in the script that said exactly what that element would be, or did you talk with Randall about what you thought that chemical component would be and the physical effect that it would have on her?
There wasn't any detail in the script, and I think we wanted to keep it to the individual audience members' imagination and not really dive into the gore of what that would mean. But having the physical restraints on myself of being cooped up in a ball for the majority of my scenes and feeling that strain to extend your limbs and real zip ties around my wrist created a physical toll on my body that was able to almost mirror, and I could exaggerate in my own head what Tracy must be emotionally going through with everything that we didn't even see on the page aside from that moment.
Yeah. And you were talking a little bit before about working with Randall before a couple of the scenes, but overall, what was the way that the two of you really collaborated and the way that you wanted to figure out a lot of Tracy's character details and the way that you would figure out a lot of the elements and a lot of the beats for scenes? Because there are so many moments for you on camera where you're the only person in a scene or in a frame.
Absolutely. And Randall was so present in being there with me. There were a couple of times where he actually wanted to be in the box there with me. And they were like, Randall, we're going to see you on camera. You can't be in there. But having his physical presence at all times and being able to feel the energy in that box, I think was so important for both of us. But constant communication and asking lots and lots of questions is something that I love to do. But taking the words on the page, we were really lucky to have such a detailed script. Sometimes as actors, you'll get scripts and it's a very basic outline of the beats in this script, but I was really thankful to have a writer that was so vibrant with his language and so descriptive so that we could really have an understanding of his intentions. And Randall and I made constant note of fine tuning every single beat and wanting to make sure that we hit every beat and more so that we could even have more footage to choose from in the editing room.
And in working on this character and on this project in particular, what are the biggest things that you feel you came away learning from playing this role?
I think the importance of giving a selfless performance was something that I really took away from this movie, and finding a genuine truth and playing a character that's experiencing such an extended state of fear. I couldn't be thinking about how I looked or how I sounded or how I was appearing on screen because it was snapping me out of this environment. And filming a scene where I'm trapped in solitary confinement and it's just myself in the camera, it's so intense where as compared to a scene where you have lots of co-stars surrounding you, and the energy was solely dependent on what I was giving to the camera and how it was perceiving me. So I had to really stay in the emotions of what Tracy was experiencing and couldn't let myself snap out of it at all in order to find that genuine truth and bring the authenticity of her emotions to life.
Amazing. Well, I really enjoyed watching your performance in this film, and thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so
taking the
much,
time to
Mara.
talk all about it, Caitlin.
It's so nice meeting you.